All right, welcome to a very special episode of Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Semo?
Well, we're going to talk movies and cinema. That's why I've got my it is easy to be green shirt on. So uh mostly about storytelling. I want to go into a little bit of cinematography and directing versus the acting because I was watching the other day the Warcraft movie. I don't know how long it's been out, but I just saw it on the stream.
2014.
Oh,
Something
for
like
God's
that,
sakes.
yeah.
It's been a while, but that's I just watched it the other day. And to me, it was a good example of seeing it straight in front of you, decent acting, but horrible directing and cutting of scenes that makes it look like it's bad acting.
Mm.
And one of the main characters in the movie is the same actor that played Ragnar in the Vikings series, uh, which reminded me of something. I told Heath we still need to do an episode where we do a reaction scene to the Ragnar versus
Mm.
the King theology discussion. But that's for another day, I think, because that's one of the best scenes in cinema, I think, at least TV cinema, series cinema. But overall, it was kind of a meh story, but there were a lot of really good mini stories in it. And that's what
Mhm.
I told you, Heath, via text, and you wanted to talk about Dune from there. So
In part because one of the failings, I think, of modern cinema, modern storytelling is that it's uh it's just a 3 hour TikTok video, or more precisely, a sequence of
no,
3 hour TikTok
no,
videos.
but
And
this one was different. There was like three different
mhm,
storylines that each in their individual self was decent, but they didn't really come together to make a
Well,
great movie.
yeah,
part of that problem, though, is this comes from somebody. I loved Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, or just whatever the first one was subtitled. I loved Warcraft 2. I loved the expansion. Loved Warcraft 3 for warts and all. I get it. Yes, they had to put a unit cap on because processors of the day couldn't handle large armies. I get it. It changed. Um, and yeah, I got my druid Tauren stomping around World of Warcraft. So part of the issue that I think really kind of dealt a death blow to that movie in particular was just the fact that one, they're trying to cover the events leading up to the first game. So people like Lothar and Gamarita and all the people that featured in the first game, they were the ones that should have taken center stage. Now they created what was the orc's name from the main orc basically.
it was the guy that they did the kind of animated game thing. I don't even know if that
Right.
ever even
He
came out.
No, they turned it into the introduction of Warcraft 3.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna get all sorts of flack for this because I mean he's chieftain of the horde whenever you go to Ogrimmar. He's sitting there on his
Hmm.
throne, you know.
Hmm.
But anywho, Thrall. Sorry. But he was a character from Warcraft 3, well, in between Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3. So they're like having to take they're basically creating this mythology while also injecting their own revisionist mythology back into it to try to create this cohesive thing. And it's just
Hmm.
like, okay, in the hands of a skilled filmmaker, maybe, and we're going to put a big asterisk by skilled filmmaker because that's actually a very difficult thing to wrangle, is taking storylines from like 1990-ish Orcs and Humans,
Yeah.
and then Warcraft 3, which came out 10 years later, 2002, 2003 timeframe. Trying to take storylines and they overwrote each other. The third one overwrote stuff that happened in the first. It's a big blender mess of crap that happens, and then trying to take that and transfer from one media art form into a different art form different form of media, it's like, okay, you're losing the interactive aspect of a video game, so that's going to create a bit of a barrier. How do you tell this whole backstory in a cohesive manner? And yeah, it's a tangled web, and I don't, they didn't succeed because the audience said, "Oh no,
Add to that,
no."
one of the hard things to follow was they, you know, it's not they all look the same kind of mentality. It's y- yes, I'm a human looking at what is the depiction of an orc, but they did should have done more to make sure you could tell who was who. Because there were some times where the second in command was talking to the first in command, and I thought the first in command was the one that saw the other person, and it was like at least have them wear different armor. The main big baddie was completely different than all of them, but then other than that, they were all so similar that it was like, which one's talking now?
Yeah,
Please say their
it
name in this scene. Please say
for
their name in
all
this scene.
for all the crap I give Peter Jackson's The Hobbit, um, they at least made sure all the dwarves had different facial hair, different, hairdos and crap like that. I just realized I got my contrast set up way too high. Every little blemish is coming through here, so that's
It's all right.
pleasant
It's
to
just
look
your
at.
face.
Yeah,
Well,
Well, at least we have processors to catch them all now.
yeah.
you bring up an interesting points because way back, one of the first videos we did that more than a couple people watched was our uh preview review of the Wheel of Time before the first season actually came out, a couple weeks before the season actually came out, and what were our expectations. And part of that was just looking at the trailer and what some of the people had said, it sure seems like what you people being the creative types, now we're in trouble again, the people behind the camera, you cared more about things that weren't related to telling this story. And one of the flaws I felt in as Warcraft as an example was it really seemed like the people who made that movie were more interested in bringing that world to life on the screen, and it looked fantastic, but where's the story?
Yeah.
And that is one of the I'm going to leave this on mute so that uh we don't have
So
to
that
worry
I
about
don't get mad
copyright
at you.
strikes. Yeah. And I just want to let this play for a little bit because um the trailers, especially the third one, they look fantastic. And
Mhm.
the whole movie of Dune 2, and this is saying something considering one of the restrictions they have, especially in the second one, which has even less off-planet stuff going on. You don't have that introductory bit that you had in the first one. It's all on this desert planet. So ecologically, visually, you're very limited, and yet the director, the cinematographer, the art people, they managed to make everything look interesting. They managed to capture use the visual medium to their, and that's even his movies that don't work, they look great. And so even the ones I've seen where I thought, that didn't really work, that didn't really land, I could at least see what he was going for. I could at least see the story he was trying to tell, even if I didn't think he told it. Um, and, and that's a big reason why I think this movie works and is better than the first one, even, is because it's clear from the first one and the second one what he cared about was telling this story. And part of that story is the visuals. Part of that story is bringing to life this very odd world that Frank Herbert created.
I want to get something clarified before Chuck chimes in here.
No.
You keep interchangeably saying verses 1 and then 2 and 3. Is there a 1 and 2 that's been out already? Or is
Oh,
2 the new one?
oh.
Oh, no, 2 is the new one. I mean,
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure because I watched the first one and I kind of went, but I was also probably drunk. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't watch 2 first.
no,
And
and
that's why I was confused.
in my brain, I also, it's all kind of jumbled up because I've watched the original cut and the director's cut of the David Lynch version, and I
Don't call it the
watched.
David Lynch version. He disowned
That's
that because of too much studio interference. Call
that's
it the
true.
84 version.
That's true. The 84 version. So I've seen both cuts of that, and I
The
watched
sci-fi
the sci-fi
miniseries.
miniseries. I watched the first part once, and I don't know why it stuck in my brain, how I still remembered it. I didn't watch several years after that. They did do the follow-up of Children of Dune. I didn't bother watching that one. Um, so there is kind of a mishmash in my brain. Plus, I've never actually read the novels, but my brother read, I think, pretty much all of them, including the ones his son wrote, and Frank Herbert and his son are listed as the authors, but it's really just all off the notes and unfinished stories that his father wrote. So it's all kind of a jumbled mess in my brain.
I read, I don't know, one or two of the books. I don't remember, maybe even three. I was in Iraq at the time, and there was a lot of in between the downtime. It's this weird thing where you get a lot of downtime, and then you have like extreme moments where you have to move a mountain in 24 hours, and then you got a more downtime. So at some point, I read the book, like three of the books, maybe two. I don't know. I don't want to get too much into spoiler territory because that's what we're going to do a little bit
Mhm.
later. So this is coming, from my perspective, this is somebody who, well, I'm vaguely familiar. I know Dune as as this thing that has influenced so much of modern storytelling. It's a bit like John Carter of Mars when you actually stop and think about it, that a lot of people might, they made a movie of John Carter of Mars back, 10 years ago as
Mhm.
well. And a lot of people thought that was kind of hokey. And it's like, yeah, but so many elements of that ended up going into our modern storytelling that it seems kind of a little quaint and old fashioned. The, the ideas put forth by Dune, they are a different sort of world building than what Tolkien did.
Mhm.
They approach world building from a different direction than Tolkien did. So I think that's kind of interesting that you started talking about I was about to say Warhammer. That's a different thing, but you were talking about the Warcraft movie, and then you transition. That made you think of Dune and how these complicated stories can get told, and
Mhm.
then the successes and failures. That's kind of
Well, and
interesting.
for decades, Dune has been called by artsy type people the unadaptable novel. It has been declared this is entirely unadaptable. It cannot be done. And to a certain extent, that's correct. And I think that's where Villeneuve deserves credit, and whoever gave him the green light to do it the way he wanted to do it, because in a sense, he's not adapting the novel. He's adapting the story into the
Mhm.
visual medium. And um it did you ever get uh bored and drunk enough to ever watch the 84 movie, Sam?
I
um
saw the 84 movie back in the mid 80s.
One of the
So,
interesting things about it that I think make
oh,
it not work very well is Herbert writes a lot of internal monologues, and they try to do that in the 84 movie. You hear a lot of voiceover that's what people are thinking inside their head, and that is one of the things that made people say you can't adapt this to the screen. It doesn't work on screen. And the fact that the 84 version didn't do that well, is that an understatement, Chuck? That they said, see, we told you it couldn't be done. Well, I think Villeneuve manages to walk that line where he doesn't really bother to try and adapt that part of it. He doesn't try and adapt Herbert's style. He's adapting Herbert's vision, which I think puts him up there with what Jackson did with Lord of the Rings, which was, if we have to take a line that was said over here in Return of the King and put it in Fellowship because it works here and it helps tell the overarching story, then we'll do that. And yes, that's not being wholly faithful to Tolkien's book, but it is being faithful to Tolkien's work.
So yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. And very famously, there was studio interference with Two Towers, where they mandated that there had to be a conflict between like the Ringwraith, the Nazgul, and stuff like that. So that's the whole reason why Faramir ended up having to like capture the hobbits and start taking them back to the White Citadel. And
Oh,
then
I didn't know that.
in Osgiliath, that's where the Ringwraith comes down, scares Frodo, and that's why Sam has that line. By all rights, we shouldn't even be here. That
Was not aware.
was the little wink to everyone who was in the know that studios have this tendency to interfere because producers are the smartest people in Hollywood. All you have to do is ask them and they'll tell you. So yeah, that's been part of the issue. The other part of the issue is that Frank Herbert's work in sci-fi in general, because it deals with such esoteric concepts, they don't necessarily have to kind of follow a traditional story structure. They don't have to follow the 3-act structure or the hero's journey or the story wheel or whatever Dan Harmon calls it, or blah 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 blah. All of those story structures. Sci-fi doesn't really have to do that because they're trying to tell things in a different way. They're trying to broach subjects that might not necessarily fit nicely into the basics of storytelling that have been around since the Epic of Gilgamesh in the West and Journey to the West in China. So I mean, you got some old stories there, and when you look, it's pretty typical. You get storytelling has a way to do things, and sci-fi likes to step out of the traditional way of doing things in order to explore that, which might not necessarily be conducive to making a movie in Hollywood's eyes or a TV show or anything like that. It can be a little awkward.
Well, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Sam.
Well, you have to
Everyone go ahead.
Yeah, you have to have that mindset anyways when you think of sci-fi, because just the very premise of what's happening is something we can't scientifically comprehend at this point. We're talking about how can we travel to the next nearest star, and we're like wormholes and blah blah blah, and like, how does that work? We don't quite know. Well, that gives you free reign to pretty much do anything in that realm, because how do you know how it works?
So that actually leads me to is a perfect segue. I wasn't going to go here yet, but I'm going to jump right in to I find it interesting that there have been some really wildly divergent takes on the movie, even from people who liked it. Not wildly divergent in that this movie was terrible. No, this is the greatest movie since, Return of the King. Oh, okay. Well, I'm ignoring the outliers there. No, I mean from people who actually thought this was really good to great. Some pretty wildly divergent ideas. And one of the ones I heard that made me chuckle and go, I wonder who else would agree with this is this movie purposefully or accidentally a pro-life movie? Because throughout the whole movie, Paul and Lady Jessica are telepathically talking to the unborn child Jessica is pregnant with. And that made some of the conservative people I listened to go, this is a pro-life movie. Okay, I don't know that that's what they were going for, but I find it interesting that the movie would allow for that take. And is that kind of, does anyone else feel like that is a mark of a good story if you can have people all over the place in how they're analyzing and addressing and reacting to the movie?
I think it might be a reach, a little bit of a reach there.
Well, and that's why your comment made me think of it, is because my first playing devil's advocate with myself was, well, okay, but anyone who doesn't think that can just say, well, they're using magical space LSD, so it doesn't count. I mean, isn't that basically what spice is, Chuck? Or I don't know how much you know about the backstory, but I
Spice
mean,
melange is used for everything. Let's, before we get too into the weeds here, let's just establish the setting, right? This
mm,
happens, what, 40,000 years in the future?
10,000, the year
10,000. Yeah,
10,000.
I'm thinking of Warhammer 40K. There you
Once
go.
again,
Which is, well, you can, anyone who's familiar with both settings know that they're kind of interchangeable. You know, the Imperium of Man and blah, 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 blah.
hmm
But so 10,000 years in the future, we have had the great AI revolt, right? We crushed the computers. So absolutely nothing utilizes a computer anymore. Everything is analog. Making the jump in between planets and in between stars requires you just doing a bunch of genetic modification and pumping a human being full of this spice to the point where they can make astromech. They're a walking R2D2 at that point.
hmm
They're just well, no, I shouldn't say walking either, because if you know, you know. Um, they basically have evolved humans to whatever you need the human to be. Do you need the human to be a
hmm
scribe? Well, yeah, if you know, we got bloodlines established that are just great at recording data up here and on paper and stuff because you don't use computers. You need pilots, we got those. You need warriors, we got those. Um, and so that's kind of this world that you step into. And the
That's
spice,
that's like the drug version of John Watson. I can take this baby and make them anything I want them to be.
Well, that is where the sci-fi part of it gets interesting, because basically Herbert created a sci-fi story that is incredibly feudal. The setting is a feudal system. In a lot of ways, it's science fiction, but yet also regressive and fantasy. That was his
well,
kind of twist on the genre.
when you actually look, and you know, I hate to bring up modern day real estate markets, but um, unfettered capitalism can lead to feudalistic states where you have a mega
Yes.
corporation go into a market, buy up every house, turn, you can't buy houses anymore. You have to rent to the Lord, which is a
hmm
company. And it's just like that it is a very strange thing that different forms of rulership, either by governmental or just by financial, keep popping up throughout history. So it wasn't a bad idea to lean heavily into this feudalistic state that yeah, I'm sure that Herbert saw elements of even back when he wrote the books.
Yeah,
He
well,
just
from what little I know of his biography, according to some, he was some degree or a major hippie, depending on who you asked, and wrote most of the books while on magic mushrooms. And so that's part of where the idea of, the original idea of LSD was, oh man, this is incredible. Think what we can do when we open our minds, when we expand our minds. There was all this. I think we talked briefly a while ago, Sam, about. I remember when HGH first became a thing, like 15 to 20 years ago. I remember reading stuff and people thinking we've discovered the fountain of youth, and then all of a sudden you realize, yeah, it doesn't quite work like that, and there are a few negative side effects.
Yeah, like it's the
But
fountain of youth for your organs, so they keep growing and you die.
and
That's
you get a giant forehead, John Cena. I mean, allegedly. Uh, but but that is part of why science fiction is so interesting, and why I think the classics are classic, because you can look at the history, which is our future that Herbert created, and say, wow, he somehow foresaw you will own nothing and like it, because we're going to create a genetic caste system. So you are genetically predisposed to like it because we made you that way. In
Mhm.
much the same way that you can look at Starship Troopers, the book, not that god awful movie that I hate, and say, whoa, this was written in the 50s and he foresaw the the societal collapse that was going to happen in the late 60s and 70s, and that's exactly what he's talking about, and he wrote that in the early 50s.
Well, I think part one had some issues, right?
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if it conveyed how vital spice is to the galaxy. Yeah, it said that spice is vital, but I don't know if the audience truly understand that this is like microprocessors plus oil plus hell, I don't know if we have anything on our planet
it
that
it
could
would be like
possibly.
it would be like Taiwan if Taiwan was also Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, a
And then it's
combination of
and
all
then
the
it
technology and all the oil.
and then it becomes the most important place to defend on the planet.
Right.
Yeah, but I
And
can
I
get all my power from solar panels and wind. Why would I need all that oil?
you just hurt
The
me.
but dude, I don't know if the first movie, part one, had some issues, and I'm
But
willing to go into some of the
Oh,
issues
I'll
I had
give
but
with part
the
one.
layman opinion. I got that impression.
Okay.
And I know none of the lore. And I last saw the 1984 movie in probably like 1988 when I was 8 years old. And for all the reasons Heath said, wasn't very interesting for an 8-year-old. So it's
well, and I wonder if part of that was on purpose of if, hey, the people who catch how important spice is great, but in much the same way that I've griped that the MCU should have gone small after Infinity War and Endgame and gone
Mhm.
to Spider-Man and Daredevil and that thing, was he trying to keep the story relatable by making the focus of it House Atreides versus House Harkonnen? This group of people, these houses, this classic feudal tale of the good and noble, Duke versus the evil Duke, and more specifically Paul and what he has to go through. Make the story smaller to make it more relatable.
Do you think Dune 1 would have done as well if it hadn't been for Game of Thrones? Like Game of Thrones came out, became insanely popular.
That's a good
Most
point.
people didn't have this idea of what a great house was. They're like, oh, the king just rules his nation, and then all of a sudden it's like you see something like Game of Thrones where it's like, oh yeah, most of the soldiers don't fight for the king. They fight for their own household.
I, I hadn't thought of that, and that's a really good point because this movie was funded by Warner Brothers, who owns HBO or HBO, whichever way it goes. And the second one barely got made because Warner Brothers was so gun shy about big budget movies because of how poorly the DC movies had
Yes.
performed or underperformed that they wouldn't greenlight the second one until they saw the results of the first one. And it just so happened that it came out while a lot of places were still locked down. So it came out simultaneously on HBO or HBO Max. And so there was a lot of concern of it's not doing that great in the box office. And we don't know what the HBO numbers are because the streaming services tend to be rather obscure and obtuse in their numbers. And it may be that it did gangbusters on HBO in part because that audience was already conditioned for a story like this. I hadn't thought of that.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that, trying to explain, you have to think about for most Americans, they have no idea about feudalism or royal or the structure or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so I always kind of thought when I watched Dune 1, I'm just like, if it hadn't been for Game of Thrones, I know a bunch of my friends that would have just been confused. Why is the house like this? And why are they fighting with the other house? And what do you mean the emperor is siding with one of the houses, even though he just gave the other house the deed to the
But he's not doing
planet.
it openly. It's all
And it's
sneaky, and
just like,
yeah.
yeah, okay, you if you're familiar with Game of Thrones, there was a lot of intrigue and backstabbing, and that really normalized it in the mind of
Mhm,
the audience
mhm,
as to what could possibly be going on. I do think that Dune Part One could have been a little bit stronger as to explaining why the Emperor was assisting House Harkonnen.
mhm,
Why did he give Atreides the deed to the planet, only to like a month later side with Harkonnen and
mhm.
have Atreides wiped out? You kind of needed a scene there to explain the fact that the Emperor felt threatened, and so he
Mm.
was basically setting Atreides up for failure so that he could justify this action. You kind of
Yeah.
needed something like that, and I
Well,
felt it
I think that's one of the
missed.
several reasons the second one is the better movie, because he manages to explain all that and add those scenes in. One of the criticisms I've heard, and I'm curious what you think, Chuck, and what Sam thinks in expectation of the movie, having not seen it yet, is one of the criticisms I've heard is, hey, Christopher Walken, you see him in the trailer, he's the Emperor. He's barely in the movie, and some people thought that was a waste of a talent like Christopher Walken. Um, I thought it worked. I didn't miss his scenes because the scenes he's in, he's so damn good.
But Sam, do you have an idea about that? About
Well, to me, since he's pointedly in the trailer,
Mhm,
there was no bigger role for that character. But they wanted to bring somebody in that's going to bring the star power,
mhm,
even though they already had their idea of who was with the other roles and who was playing where they needed to be, and they had their young talent and that they're developing. But you can drive in that star power with that cameo style role of someone who's not going to have a big part.
mhm.
You just make sure they're in the trailer too, so people come to see the movie. And you
Sorry, I
hope
was having something falling down over here. I'm painting this play. Yeah, everything. I'm doing a bunch of work. I was just like, oh God, I don't know, that's gonna fall on me. So if you saw me moving around a little bit there, I apologize.
the dangerous game you play with that though is you need everybody else to have such an
Mhm.
impact that people don't notice it's such a small part.
That was one of the few criticisms I had of the movie, is that the longer the movie went on, the more you realize, oh yeah, Zendaya's in this because she's a model and someone thinks she has a good look, as they like to say in Hollywood. And Timothy Chalamet, I had seen him in other things before Dune and thought he was a good young actor, and I usually hate young actors, and thought, you know what, he's pretty good. And I was impressed with him in the first one. He really shines in this one. And I think it's helped by the fact that most of his scenes, or most of his really, you know, pivotal, impactful scenes, he's playing opposite Javier Bardem, who has been a great actor for decades. And it's one of his better performances, which is saying something.
Yeah.
And then even when he's off the screen, you see the primary antagonist. You've got to have a good antagonist, and
Yeah.
Stellan Skarsgård is phenomenal in everything he's in as well. And so now you're setting the hero up to have a good villain. But the longer the movie went on, the more it kind of shows that she can't quite keep up with these other performers.
My issue with Stellan Skarsgård is the fact that he was really good in the first one.
Mhm.
The only issue is it was like, where is he in the second one?
Yes, I found that to be more impactful than the people who were criticizing, hey, I wanted more Walken, was, well, no, I thought the Emperor was in it an appropriate amount, enough to give you that added element of the story of the imperial politics of it. I was more annoyed that we need more Stellan Skarsgård here to push what is going on with the Harkonnens. And um I found that to be one of the weaker parts of the story. But to me, it's a nitpick that keeps the movie, in my mind, it's really good. It could have been darn near perfect.
Well, we're kind of good at picking nits. So
I mean, that's what we do every Friday here on this channel. So
I to switch a slight direction, then you can get back on your points. You made a comment, and I think you articulated it better before we got on air than when we were on air. That if something's really good, that a lot of people can think it's really good for different reasons.
mhm.
And I chuckled because immediately in my head, and I'm usually not the pessimist of us, but immediately in my head, I thought about our Witcher Blood Origins episode,
oh,
and I was like, and if it's really bad, we can all agree it's really bad, but we all had our different reasons.
yeah, that goes towards storytelling,
Well,
and the crazy things about when you do something right, people will view it from multiple different ways. When you do something wrong, people can still view it from multiple different ways. I think the idea of, bad storytelling is kind of lazy. I like to see people put a little bit more analysis into that.
yeah, yeah.
Some of the
And the channels I watch that I have like really gotten hooked into are things like Mahler or the Critical Drinker or guys like that is yeah, they're funny, they have a good delivery, but really what hooked me is the first videos of theirs I watched, and they're going in depth. They're giving not just their subjective take on it, but here is an objective analysis of here's a side by side comparison of scenes, for instance, things like that. And you made me think of an analogy I'd had that I forgot about, which was I've recently been playing the first Witcher game. And I remember texting you
Yep.
when I first started it, and your response was basically, "Why are you doing that? That game is janky as F."
Yep.
And because it was like literally the first game this company had made. But to me, I think there's a testament there to how great the storytelling was, because though the game is janky as heck, and I got sidetracked and I haven't played it in a month, and so I'm dreading going back to it and having to relearn how the stupid mechanics work, but I'm willing to do it because you are immediately hooked with one of the things we praise Robert Jordan about on Fridays is his ability to introduce a character, even a minor character, and that is a fully fledged human being. Yes, it is a fantasy human in this fantasy world, but immediately there's something that connects you, the reader or the viewer in this case, the player in this case, with that character, and you go, consciously or subconsciously, I want to know more about this person. I want to know more about who they are and why they're doing what they're doing.
I'll give another example of a game that took a lot of criticism for technical reasons, but because it was a good story, it is the second Dragon Age. The second Dragon Age took a lot of criticism because they rushed it out. And basically the programmers just reused maps. So you would go to the same map and it would be a different part of the story. And they did that a lot. It's basically the whole game. You've got like 12 maps for about 80 hours of gameplay, of role play game. But the story was good and the game flow was good. So it was like this was my favorite of the three.
Yeah.
Well, and The Witcher, for crying out loud, at this point, I think everything Witcher related is like 27% of Poland's entire GDP. So that tells you something about the story. And to slightly disagree with you, Chuck, one of the things to me, a hallmark of, before we started recording, I mentioned the Guinness record for the longest sustained urination I've ever witnessed. And then all the way home, on the drive home, we were talking about 12 Monkeys.
Right.
It's like, because wait a minute, but if this then that, and if this then that, and this, and hey, did that mean this? So the entire 25 minute drive home, we're talking about the movie. And same thing on the way home, me and my wife were just the whole way home talking about the movie. And to me, and one of the things I said is, because of they weren't really criticisms, but they were negatives. And that was interesting to me, that it wasn't that my wife was criticizing the movie, she was pointing out negative aspects of the story. And I think that adds to it, which is that if you really, really strip it way, way down, this is a chosen one stereotypical trope. That's basically what Herbert did. Is he did the same thing Jordan does later, which is, I'm going to take the idea of the chosen one and I'm going to put a twist on it. I'm going to turn it on its head so that by the end of the movie, you're, as she pointed out, are we supposed to still be rooting for Paul? Because I'm not sure. Which to me is one of the great things about the story is this still the same Paul that we saw in the first movie? But it is a natural progression. It makes sense how he gets to who he is at the very end of the movie. It's not jarring. It doesn't take you out of the established brand, if you will. The Dune as a brand, you're not. So the other night I finally got around to watching Elvis, because Elvis is in Dune 2. And I said, "Oh, hey, it's Elvis." He's Bautista's younger brother, isn't he, or older brother?
Yeah, her cousin or something. The
Yeah, they're
character he
related.
plays, I forget the name of the
Yeah,
character. He's Sting in the '84
in
version.
the 84 version. He's one of Stellan Skarsgård's nephews, and he is an absolute psychopath. And he becomes the direct antagonist to Paul, and they have to fight it out at the end of the movie. Anyway, and seeing him made me go, oh, I need to remember to watch Elvis, because I've had it on my Netflix list for a while now, and I finally got around to watching it. And it was interesting watching it after, right, like the day after watching Dune, because Villeneuve has a definite tone, a definite artistic vision, and that's one of the things that makes both Dune Part 1 and 2 work so well. Is it nothing ever is like jarring and takes you out of the moment, whether it's dialogue, whether it's a performance, whether it's a visual. Well, uh Elvis is somewhat odd in its uh construction, in its technical aspects, because essentially what Elvis is an almost 3 hour long music video. And at first you're like, huh? When you're, because it's very different from your normal biopic. Even something like Walk the Line, Johnny Cash, there was a lot of music in it, but it was still a dramatic movie, your kind of standard biography. It Elvis is very stylistic, and that's why I consider it, and there's so much music in it, like woven through the dramatic scenes, that's why I call it's really a giant music video. Well, there's a problem there, and I want to preface this with the fact that I despise rap music, especially any rap music that's come out in the last 15 years, but that's not why I'm criticizing this. And it's not because rap music bastardizes one of the great American inventions and contributions to the world, which is R&B, like classic Motown R&B. Out of nowhere, there are these two rap songs in the middle of Elvis. And I kind of understand why they did it, partly for, hey, we want to get the younger audience, but partly because it's in the scenes where it's showing Elvis's roots, which were Beale Street in Memphis, which was one of the homes of the blues. B.B. King came from Beale Street. There are pictures of B.B. King and young Elvis together. They knew each other as young performers. And so it takes these classic blues and R&B songs that influenced Elvis, and then all of a sudden turns them into rap songs. And it's not that me personally, I don't like this music. You just hit a brick wall creatively.
Well,
You just hit a
you know
brick
why they
wall and
did it
said, "Wait, this
because
doesn't make sense."
no, I could tell you exactly why they did it because some showrunner executive with gender studies degree knows that he was heavily influenced by black musicians, but they don't know what that means.
Yeah, that is a
So
major part of the
so to
story.
them, they're
Yeah.
like, oh, black musicians got to be something rap. Let's put that in there. Let's make the
Mhm.
connection that we want to bring the message.
Which makes me also, to that point, now you've made me wonder, did they think the audience was too stupid to get the point? Because that's one of that's one of the pieces of credit I give to Villeneuve, even
No, I think they
when
think
it
the
doesn't
audience thinks
work.
like they do. This is the mistake of
Mm,
these people with these postmodern degrees is they come out into the media, into the show media, like you're talking about movie industry, into all of these admin positions, and they think everybody else thinks like they do. But people don't. People don't immediately say, "Oh, well, he was influenced by blues. He's appropriating black music." No, they're like, "Oh, well, he was colorblind." That's the initial reaction.
mhm.
No, they're coming out and trying to spread a message of appropriation, but the audience actually they think the audience is going to get it. But most of the audience is like you going, "Why are there two rap songs here? Thought this was about Elvis."
Mhm. Yeah, and it's especially they make it even worse in those scenes because it's a a black performer singing some classic blues song that then morphs into, actually there's a third one that's even annoying, because in the credits, the song that plays at the credit scene is Elvis's In the Ghetto, which, much like, you remember the awful Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie where I think it was Puff Daddy, one of his early big hits, was a basically a cover slash sample of Kashmir. And that was the song that plays the credits on Godzilla. That's what I thought of, because all of the sudden some, modern rapper comes in and starts doing a couple of rap verses in the middle of Elvis's In the Ghetto. And it's, once again, I finally made it to the end of the movie and you just took me out of it again. And that actually segues me to the only, unless anyone else has any other thoughts, the only real spoilery point I wanted to make.
Well, one of the things I wanted to touch on is you said you were talking with your wife about whether or not you should still be rooting
Mhm.
at the end. That was
Okay,
before you got.
thank you because I forgot what got us to where we were. So
Oh, yeah. Heath saw the guy who played Elvis, and he went off on an old man tangent about, back in my day, back in Dickety 2, we wore a buckle on our shoe because that was the style at the time. We
Exactly.
tied an onion to our belt, and you
And the
know,
last great rap musician was Digital Underground and the Humpty Dance.
right.
I
So
thought it was Ben Shapiro. He was number one not long ago.
yeah,
It
the
actually wasn't horrible.
the bad guy,
The bad guy.
if you actually look at what the author stated in interviews, he was fascinated by the idea of charismatic leaders setting something up and getting something rolling that the followers would then go off and the leader himself would have no control
Mm,
afterwards. He wasn't trying to necessarily make a one-for-one comparison to actual history, but just the fact that that does sometimes happen, where a person might start off with best of intent and all of a sudden it gets away, or you start going past a line that you can't come back from. So he had expressed in interviews. I keep talking about him in the present tense, but Herbert mentioned in interviews that he was always kind of tickling with that idea of how you can really be rooting, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is spiraling out of control.
mhm.
Where Paul launches a freaking jihad against I'm not
Well,
going to say it yet. Spoiler alert. We're not
yeah.
at that point yet. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was you mentioned you guys were talking about Robert Jordan, all that sort of stuff, and how he can create a character that was, he comes out full-fledged, right? And that used to be just bread and butter. That used to be expected.
Mhm.
I like to compare, when people don't know what I'm talking about, I'll compare Conan the Barbarian, 83 and 2012. The Jason
Mm.
Momoa version versus the Arnold Schwarzenegger version. The Arnold Schwarzenegger version, they spent time making the audience give a shit about that character. The 2012 Jason Momoa version, you, the audience, were just supposed to be along for the ride, rooting for this guy. He started off as a badass little kid, but it wasn't this traumatic experience. He wasn't, his family wasn't butchered, and he was put into slavery, and then he was worked at a mill, and then he was put into a barbarian pit fighting. Yeah, everything in the 83 version was designed to make Conan a sympathetic character so that he could actually do what the script required of him. It's also this,
Mm.
it's been done many, many times before. Up, the Pixar movie Up,
Mm-hmm.
very famously, they had to include that first 12 minutes because otherwise, if you cut that first 12 minutes, the old man just seems like a dick the entire movie.
And they made the greatest love story of modern cinema in 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And
Um,
created the Rick Astley paradox because he would not give his wife up, so therefore he let her down.
but why do I come on these things?
I don't know.
Okay.
Why do
All right.
I? Why am I here?
Oh, I got better shit to do. I could be getting a root canal right now. Oh no. All right, are we ready to talk spoilers? Or
Go
are we
ahead.
still wanting to talk?
Um,
Now, Sam has done like a very, very little amount of talking in this episode. Sam, what were your thoughts on Dune 1? Because
it's a
you
good
you
good question.
saw you saw Dune 1. I want to get the nitty-gritty of what you believed and what you thought about it.
And frankly, between the three of us, you're the one that's the most normie, both in general and especially in this particular talking point,
Gotta drink my
because
spice.
yeah, you haven't seen as much, read as much as we have on this crap, so you're the closest we can get to a normie perspective from the first movie.
Let me see what I can draw from the memory banks because it was super late at night. I believe Taco Bell was involved. And yeah, so it was something that extended into the wee hours of the morning of watching a movie because I don't know why. So
Winner of
that's
the franchise award.
yeah,
Franchise wars, not bad company to keep.
yeah. So I did get that the importance of the spice. So we already kind of went over that. I think I'm usually I usually don't have a problem with movies that are quiet and slow as they go because I usually think those tend to be very good at developing characters. Especially if you got good actors and actresses that pull off silent acting where we actually get what they're intending and what their emotions are based on just how they look at somebody. A movie I can think of that does it very well is Ex Machina. Ex Machina was a very quiet, slow moving movie, and by the end you're like, no. I didn't have that no moment at the end of Dune. It just kind of crawled and then ended. It's
Yeah.
kind of
Well, it's part of the problem was is that the Harkonnen invasion happened at the end of the second act.
mhm.
You know, that should have been in my personal opinion,
Mm-hmm.
that should have been the tragic ending. They should have made it a three-part, one, two, three, cut it up a little bit, but really, I think they did a great job. I think Timothy Chalamet did a great job establishing Paul, acting everything he needed to do, showing that he was book smart and eager to learn the local cultures and stuff like that. I understood Lady Jessica and Leto's relationship. And then you get to a point where they use the Harkonnen invasion as the end of the second act, and you're just like,
Now what?
oh,
Yeah.
Okay, now you just kind of ending with a whimper. They had, I think, one of my least favorite, not I think one of my least favorite characters, but one of my, well, my least favorite character was that black woman who was like the observer or
Hmm.
whatever. I forget the character's name, but
Hmm.
in the movie, she was a black woman who was just there to observe, and she wouldn't like tell anybody about it. But her part of the storyline, she had a lot of screen time for like having no impact on the story. And I think that some of these issues needed to get like trimmed or snipped, and you could have added that time somewhere else, or just
Or you could have used that character to kind of let the normies like me know what's going on a little bit better.
right. It's
Because
perfectly
you were,
acceptable.
yeah, you were able to get the emotional kind of connection that you needed from these characters. But as far as following the story or knowing the people or the culture or whatever, in a movie like that where you are inventing things from scratch, you do have to do a little bit of telling.
Mhm.
A little bit. It
Well,
doesn't
and
have to be, oh, this is what our culture does and this is this.
I am tired of people using exposition as a bad word.
Hmm.
Hmm.
There's nothing inherently wrong with exposition. My favorite scene in all of cinema is exposition. And that is in Jaws, where Quint is talking about the USS Indianapolis.
That's a good point.
It can be done right or it can be done wrong. And far too many of these grad school morons write like they're like trying to compete for who can do it worse than Madam Web, right? Where it's just like, hello, friend that I've known for 3 years. As you know, I have a son who is, it's shut up. No one talks like that. And it's not a question of it being exposition being a bad thing. It's just a question of whether or not it's organic, whether or not it makes sense, whether or not a character or even a human being would talk like that. Um,
That's a
so
great example because the reason it works is because that character would absolutely say that in that moment. He would
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely deliver that speech in that moment.
yeah, let's make it ridiculous here. It would be okay, so Chuck, you and I meet another friend of mine. And I say, "Oh, this is Chuck. I've known him since high school, and we did these things together. We used to go to his house and shoot birds out of a tree, and
oh yeah.
the murder piranhas in his pond and everything." That is normal. You just met my friend, and I told him what our history together. But what you're talking about bad exposition is two people walking. I walk up to you, Chuck, in the movie and be like, "Hi, Chuck, the guy I used to go to your house and shoot
Yeah,
birds out of a tree and
exactly.
murder piranhas in your pond." It's a it's the delivery. There's a right and a wrong way to deliver this.
I, you're absolutely right. You could have repurposed that character to answer some vital questions because there's nothing wrong with surprising the audience and making the audience go, wait, why is this happening? If you then have 5, 10, 15 minutes later, a character coming along and saying, hey, look, your dad is dead. Most of your family's just been wiped out. Most of your men have just been either wiped out or imprisoned. And the reason why is because your dad was a threat to the emperor. So he decided to set you up for failure and then side with your opponent.
I in hindsight, I think probably all of the criticisms and nitpicks of the first one is that as we're talking, I think Villeneuve was more concerned with establishing the characters than with telling the story,
Mm-hmm.
or than with telling a story. And I think I suspect he had an eye towards part two, because to your point, Chuck, if he if the climax would have been the Harkonnen attack, that that would have meant he would have had to cut more or do more work to make the climax of part two what he wanted, which is what it was in this movie.
Which,
That
that's why I said it really should have been 3 movies. Trim them down a little bit, have the climax of the movie of the first one be the Harkonnen
Mhm.
invasion, and, then you can get Stellan Skarsgård
Yeah.
getting his briefing about, hey, how did it go? Oh, we wiped them out. Okay, did you get did you get everybody? Yeah, we got everybody. You don't need to worry about it. And then you have Paul climbing up out of that sand dune, standing up, defiant.
Hmm.
Everyone
Hmm.
thinks he's dead, and the audience knows, okay, he's going to come back and kick some ass now.
And
And then credits, and
and
it's like,
perhaps
okay, that's a different ending. That's a different
exactly.
movie. And then you can basically
And
start off with his survival in the desert as the first act of the next movie.
and I haven't rewatched it since I watched it in theaters, but I feel like wasn't there a good 30 minutes, if not
Yeah,
45 afterwards,
that's what I'm
in much
saying.
the same way that was my criticism of the Batman is why didn't it why wasn't the climax that car chase where he captures the penguin? Why did it keep going? And I suspect that a big part of that was the desire of the filmmaker to tell the story I want to tell and set up the sequel that I want. Because I wonder if Villeneuve had been green lit at you know so that he was working on part 2 immediately after the post production of part 1, maybe he would have done that. Because then, okay, I'm not rushed. I don't feel this pressure to cram this in here. Um, what now, Sam? I too have a normie question for you because this goes along with the discussion on the drive home. I think one of the critical things from part 1 that carries over to part 2 is, did you catch, or how much did it stand out that this twist on the chosen one trope from Herbert is it's all contrived. One, it's all contrived. That
Yeah.
the Bene Gesserit, the priest class has been making this, have been forcing it. They're the ones who have created what they want to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, or not self a prophecy they intentionally fulfill when they want to. And then point 2 that goes along with that is how much Paul resents the hell out of that and fears it.
I felt it was similar to Roman Catholic politics, but I didn't get exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah,
Where,
that was a bit of a failing right there, because Heath is absolutely right.
Because
That
that becomes a major point in part 2.
Yeah, it was all manipulation from the Bene Jesuits, the Bernie Jesuit. Yeah, I don't know, but bottom line is they basically seeded this idea of a Messiah through this planet in plans that 3, 4, 500 years they would actually be the ones to fulfill it, and blah 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 blah. And that's one of the things that the Mother Superior was angry at Lady Jessica for, was that Jessica was supposed to have a girl. She was not supposed to have Paul. She chose to have Paul, which is one of the, there was a scene in the first movie where I don't the Reverend Mother was very upset with her
Mm-hmm.
because she was being arrogant or whatever.
Yeah, it was either
And
right before or right after the scene where Paul sticks his hand in the box.
yeah,
Yeah.
Lady Jessica, I think, was portrayed as a little too nice. That in the story, she's supposed to be like politically cutthroat.
I wonder if that was on purpose, because in part 2, she's one of the ones you're going, wait, who are the good guys here? Who am I rooting for? I'm not sure I like you anymore. So I'm wondering if that was on purpose to set up Lady Jessica as, oh, she's one of the heroes, and then in part 2, you sweep the leg and make the audience go, oh, wait a minute.
yeah, but I think that goes along with your complaints about how in modern movies and series and stuff, there's so much we M. Night Shyamalan wannabe stuff
Mm-hmm.
that was that necessary. What did it really change a whole lot, or did it really create a big, oh, what a twist when she becomes, or am I supposed to like her? What was that done well enough that, okay, I can justify this change in this character, or would it have been just as good as if in the first movie maybe you saw her nice on the outside, but bless your heart, nice, and undercutting everybody behind the scenes as this cutthroat uh,
Uh-huh.
relationship manipulator.
Well, that leads me to my spoiler thought. So do we want to get into that
I'm
now?
willing to go to spoilers. Is it possible to take a bit of like a 3-minute break real quick
Yes,
before
because
we
we're all
actually do
very
that?
old.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know. All right. So one of the things that makes part two work so well, and even part one, as much as you get to the end and you go, wait, is that it? Is it all builds pretty darn well. And I think the second one has more to work with story wise, as far as elements of the story goes. So it all builds very well. And it, and I preface that because after I watched it, then I came home and I started watching the channels I watch. I said, okay, all these reviews that I've been skipping, let me go back and see what these people thought of the movie. And I'd been avoiding because I didn't want even minor spoilers. And a channel I've referenced before here, Midnight's Edge, he had an interesting take on the very, very end of the movie, which when it happens, basically when Paul is victorious and Zendaya, whose character name I completely forget, goes storm
Shawnee.
Shawnee, she goes storming off into the desert by herself, basically, and that's that's how it ends for her. That's the very end of the movie is, and he was. This is a big concern to me, and this is the only thing that jumped out to him as a girl boss moment, as an element of modern storytelling for the modern audience, and to him it was a red flag. And I was curious what you thought about that, Chuck, because to me that never even crossed my mind because it's setup and payoff. It's the thing we gripe about
Yeah.
most on Fridays is the reason the books work and the two seasons of the Wheel of Time series didn't is there is no setup, so the payoffs don't pay off.
I'll start off by saying I thought that Dune 2 was a great movie, and it was a great movie and a good adaptation, right? That it's like they made some changes. Okay, the original story takes place over 4 years. We know that this story takes less than a year because Lady Jessica knows that she's just starting her pregnancy.
That's how they
She's,
mark
she,
time, which I thought was a good device
yeah.
to show you the time, the passage of time.
So we know that it's basically 8 months take place between Dune 1 and 2 at most,
Mhm.
right? So they condensed 4 years of stuff happening down into 8 months, and I understand that certain things have to change. I don't even necessarily disagree with it from a storytelling because otherwise you're going to get into this situation where Paul's sister is 2 years old, talking like a normal human and killing people. Like, it's like,
Which they
oh,
do in the 84 version, and it kind of comes out of left field.
well, but even in the 84 version, she was playing a 7-year old, right? They
Yes,
aged
yes,
her up
yes.
because having a toddler doing that crap would just look too weird. Now,
I don't know. They got away
that
with it in Pet Cemetery.
which if you want people laughing at it or whatever, that's fine, but it's I understand why they made the change, but when they made that change, they introduced a host of other issues like,
Yeah.
okay, uniting the Fremen and training them in an all new way of waging war, because that was kind of Paul's thing is
Yeah.
he came in and he's like, okay, we're gonna crank up this guerrilla fighting, but I'm also gonna teach you how to keep it going, how to up it from there, so you're not just doing these quick little surgical strikes, but you're able to actually fight as a unified army.
Hmm.
The idea
Which
that
is
he did
which
that
is
in a
the climaxing. You can get hints of it in the
right.
trailers. Is the climatic huge battle that they have. But then at the very end of the movie, it's okay. Well, now they're leaving the planet. So how do they keep doing what they're doing when they're no longer on their home turf?
Right. And that's a problem because they did the time alteration.
Hmm.
I think they could have done it maybe a different way.
I suspect that that was part of the point of bringing Josh Brolin's character back into it, is having him bridge that gap between the imperial way of doing war and what the
Right.
Fremens have been doing. That was picking that nit. That was something that kind of fizzled out for me. I felt like you, to me, Josh Brolin was a bigger waste than Christopher Walken.
Josh Brolin's character was interesting because we'd seen him in the first movie, and then we see him in the second movie, and we're like, okay, good. What's he going to be adding to the story? I thought he's the one that should have had the story arc that Chani had,
Mm.
where Chani is resisting what ends up happening. Just to clue Sam in because he's probably bored. Paul basically decides that yeah, he's going to unite the various Fremen tribes.
Yeah.
He is going to become their messiah, and he
Yeah.
is going to start a freaking jihad.
And it's not that big of a spoiler because you see it coming.
Right.
And the other thing you see coming, giggity, and why I disagree with the Midnight's Edge take is because her storming off didn't come out of left field.
Right.
It was set up from the very beginning of, I don't buy into this stuff. I'm not a religious zealot like these other people. I don't believe this stuff at all. You're not the Messiah, you're Paul.
Right.
And more to the point of, hold on, are you trying, they set up, are you trying to retake Arrakis slash Dune, the Fremen name for the planet? Are you trying to retake it for us or for you?
Yes. I had no issue. I'll say that I like the book version better, but I understand that there kind of had to be that voice of that resistance that inside the inner circle of St. Paul. Whoa, you're going way too far. Start rearing it back a little bit, pull back a little. I thought that would have been better served by Josh Brolin's character going, Paul, you're not a messiah. You're not this. You're actually
he definitely wouldn't buy into
right.
This
I
stuff.
thought it would have been a natural fit for his character if you have to have that inserted in. The fact that they made it Shawnee, I liked the first half of the movie. I really liked the first half of the movie. And then as she started resisting, as she started pulling back, I'm just like, I don't know. The fact that her betrothed or beloved or boyfriend or whatever is about to become the most powerful man on the planet, let alone the galaxy. I don't care if she believes the prophecy. I think she would be intelligent enough to go, I'm right. I've hitched my wagon to the right person. I'm gonna ride this as far as it'll go because it's paying off dividends now.
Or have her leave not because she doesn't believe in the Messiah bit, but because he's becoming a horrible person.
Right.
And that's to me, that's why I think it's not much of a spoiler, because you can see this coming, because she is repeatedly, she makes the point, basically, are you trying to defeat the Harkonnens to liberate the Fremen, or because you want vengeance and you want to take your place back as the leader of a great house?
Yes.
And so I thought they did a good job of setting that up so that her storming off doesn't come out of left field, for one. And two, to your point, Chuck, in talking about this with my wife, she made the point that, so one of Midnight's Edge's big concerns with the way this played out was they thought it undercut the character because, again, this is a sci-fi setting, but it's a feudal system. And in a feudal system, political marriages were what happened to everybody all the time if you were of the aristocracy. And what about love? Well, sometimes you found it. Like there's a good case to be made that Edward the First, who's the villain of Braveheart, who's, I'll try not to go down that tangent, he genuinely loved his wife and they had a loving relationship. But for most people, most of the time, love was what you did on the side so long as you kept it quiet.
I don't think that Shawnee's actions at the end of the movie undercut her character at all.
Hmm.
I think they undercut Paul.
Mm.
That you're ending with this defiant strut out into the desert and her getting her grapples out to summon the sandworm. If she had just, Paul says, look, I have to marry the princess in order to try to solidify something here. And she goes storming out of the room, pissed off. And then you sit there, and the final shot of the movie is Paul, just the weight of the world on his shoulders bearing down at him,
Hmm.
going, I just triggered a jihad against the entire galaxy.
Hmm.
Oh my, what the hell did, this is the weight of it all starting to pile on him. I think that would have left people with a much different feeling than seeing Chani stomp off
Hmm.
and ride triumphantly off into the sunset,
Well,
crap like that, because that does change the
yeah.
feel of what happened in the movie.
To her credit, the character's credit, though, the point I hadn't thought of though was that um that may be the acceptable thing among the great houses, but that doesn't, but remember, she's Fremen, and we don't know how it works there. And that was the point my wife made was, well, to her, being the concubine may not be acceptable at all.
Yeah.
And so it's understandable from that perspective. But
I had
I hadn't
no
thought of your
problem. I had no problem with her actions in the movies because, as you said before, the way Herbert wrote, everyone's got a ton of internal dialogue.
Mhm.
You can't do that in this sort of motion picture. So having her, be defiant and, expressing through action that which she is feeling, I got no problem with that. I sometimes look at the changes they made to adapt this and I say, I'm not really into that. I don't really like that. And then I sit back and I go, but how would I have done it better? And a lot of times
Mm.
I can't come up with something where I'm just like, I can acknowledge that something's maybe not as efficient as it should be, or it creates problems where there had been no problems before, but I can't necessarily think of no, that was an outright mistake for them to do that. No,
Mhm.
I sit there and I go, I can see why they did it. And we're now talking back in nitpick territory, or being a little underwhelmed or something, where you're going, I don't know if that's the right course, but it felt a little awkward. And I can see why Andre at Midnight's Edge said all that
Mhm.
stuff, because it does, when you look at the last decade of movies that have come out with the girl boss entitlement moment and stuff like that. The don't
Yeah.
worry, she's got friends,
And
sort
that
of.
was one of his points was it was to him, it was a red flag, but it was a bigger red flag for what might happen in part three.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a
but
different
yeah,
animal though,
but that's
because
a
we're
different animal. But here's, I've referenced this before, and I want to pull up a scene here because one of the thoughts I had is this was noodling around in my brain was not just, hey, wow, Dune 2 was really good. Okay, but why? I mean, that's the whole reason we do what we do on Fridays here is why does the book work and the Amazon series was an abomination.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons I feel like that end is more of a nitpick than a red flag is because of how it was executed. And yeah, I hadn't thought about it. It does undercut Paul, but uh I think one of the reasons I didn't think about that is because it was technically very well executed. And I want to give an example of why that is, how that is. I've referenced this a couple times because I've brought up the live action Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender, scare quotes because it's awful. Um and and a lot of the technical failings in that of how they deliver the scenes. And I've mentioned that it's not just because I love the original so much. And to me, Cowboy Bebop, Batman the Animated Series, and Avatar The Last Airbender are so good. They're not just good animated slash cartoon series. No, I would put them up there in like the top 20 TV shows of all time, period, because they're that good. And whenever I say that or whenever I'm discussing that with someone, I reference this scene right here, which is Robin has finally found the men who killed his parents, killed his family in the circus. And he's about to throw this guy off a bridge and probably kill him. And Batman comes up and says, "You can't do that. You can't let your emotions take over." And the the response here is pretty much artistic perfection.
Stuff your advice, Batman. You and your stone cold heart. You don't know how I feel. How could you?
The giant pendulous balls it takes to have a scene like that and have your protagonist answer in silence in live action. You have to be incredibly confident in your storytelling ability. But to do it in an animated series where the voice of Batman, who has now become Batman to a lot of us nerds, Conroy, doesn't utter a line. He just squints. And that, and then you have the, oh gosh, what did I just say? Moment of realization with Robin. And we talked about this a little bit the last couple of times, Sam, which is the infuriating failure on the part of a lot of actors and directors of, oh, if it's dramatic, then you need to be shouty. The reason that in scene worked, and yes, after the fact, I see the problems, is because no one said a damn thing. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. They just looked at each other. And then he left. And then she left. And then he has this moment of watching her leave, and then he turns back and has to go back into, I am Paul the political leader. I am the Messiah. I am the Duke. I now have to address my troops. And but that moment of silence conveys you don't need to set it if you have set things up properly, as I feel like Villeneuve did throughout the movie. You don't have to say anything, and so they didn't. And to me, that's why that scene is a nitpick, not a red flag or a failure.
I wonder how much, because I mean, when you talk about sci-fi movies and fantasy movies and action movies and everything nowadays, superhero movies, the audience that goes to see it are still like 80% male. But the target audience is female every time. And I wonder how much, because you're worried about the third movie coming up, how much of that was to piss off every woman in the audience? How could he let her go?
Mm.
They love each other. And to your point, now time to politic and lead my army. Switch my face, which is what guys can do.
Mm.
Switch my face to my job. I'll take care of the domestic stuff when I get back home. And I wonder how much of that was to piss off women in a motivating way. No, in a motivating way to watch the third one and see
to
what
come
she
back
does.
and see what happens.
And that's why it ended with her, because that's the target audience. That's the people they want to come back.
Yeah, that might actually be a good point right there, because I'm sitting here going, it happened in the book though. Basically that she got frustrated. She eventually understood. That's why I said I have no problem with her acting out what her emotions would be. Um, but that's a good point, that ending on Chani and on her face might actually be trying to entice that female audience to come back and see the resolution to this drama. this relationship drama, which women care a lot more about
Mhm.
than the actual world building drama, which men care more about. So I would like to also put an addendum onto Heath's point of it's the craftsmanship in this movie was extremely well done. I know that a lot of people have been bragging about, Godzilla -1 this year and how much it was able to stretch its budget.
Mhm.
But when I watch Dune 2 and they tell me it cost whatever, 190, $200 million,
is
yeah,
what the reported is. Yeah.
it's like I can see it on film. I can see it on there. And I can say, okay, well, I get it. When they go to, just to let Sam know, at a certain point, they go to the Harkonnen homeworld where there's an arena fight where they're setting up the new big bad guy.
Hmm.
And it was shot using monochrome cameras and color cameras, monochrome and color, so that they could keep it all black and white with elements of color in it. So a little flag might be red or something like that, but
Hmm.
everything else is just stark black and white. And you get that by using a monochrome camera, whereas most productions nowadays would just add a filter
Hmm.
to what was filmed. And it's like that you can, it's a weird thing because you might not know how they did it, but your mind can detect a difference. It can sit there and go,
Yours
that
might be able to. We'll
looked,
see what the colorblind person can do.
but you could even see it in that trailer that played at the beginning of this of this little conversation between us. We played the trailer. It showed scenes of that where it's just this,
Hmm.
it's nothing but black and nothing but white, and it looks vivid, it looks like alien, it looks weird. And they did great things like, hey, if you're a Harkonnen, you shave your eyebrows and your head, right? Because no eyebrows means that your expression is masked. Because on those harsh black and white images, you come across looking really, really strange when you don't have these furry caterpillars on your face. And in truth, you'd probably look really strange on a color camera as well. But
Which extra kudos to Austin Butler for being able to
yes,
pull off such a performance when you're physically hampered in such a way, and yet he was able to convey, you know, immediately, oh, new bad guy, and he's very bad.
yeah.
Yeah, and very bad in a very different way from Bautista or from Stellan Skarsgård's characters.
And that goes back to what I was saying about, when you adapt something, I sit back and I go, there were elements of his introduction, and I would have liked to have seen more about that whole plot. There were plots that got cut from the story, obviously, but I would have liked to have seen more. I would have liked to have seen more Stellan Skarsgård in this because it's like, yeah, he's a great actor, and he had like 5 minutes of screen time or something like that
Hmm.
after they set him up to be this massive, floating ball of a man threat, intimidating as all hell in the first one. And then it's just like, okay, he doesn't really do anything in the second one. And I get the narrative reason why they got to establish the new physical threat,
Yeah.
the dark reflection of Paul, somebody who was also a Bene Gesserit candidate, somebody whose bloodline was also sculpted to get to where he was now. Um, and I get it, but again, the question is, would I have done anything different, or would I have done anything better?
Well, I always like to
No.
ask that question. We've done it a lot with the Wheel of Time series.
Yes.
Is this thing they did different here, was that trying to make up for that thing they did different in the first movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, in that case, they did this other thing in the first movie and I didn't understand it and I was very critical. Did this do a good job of making up for it, or could they have just done it the original way?
Or did they just compound the mistakes?
Yeah.
Did they borrow trouble, as we've talked about in, okay, well, wait a minute, you just established this, which means all these other things that stem off of that. This isn't a butterfly effect, man. This is a tidal wave of effect of problems you're going to have downstream. And that is where I give the first part credit, is that for some of its storytelling flaws, they didn't seem to borrow trouble, and he was able to establish the characters so well that then in part two he's able to hit the ground running, so that he's able to get to the climax that he wanted to. Giggity.
No. It's yeah, I got nothing to add to that. Um, it's quite possible.
Well, the only I don't know if the final thought I have is, I can't imagine this French Canadian guy has anything even remotely close to any of the political ideas any of us have. And yet it doesn't matter, okay? Because he told a good damn story, because that's what he cared about. And there may be messages in there that he wanted to convey that I missed or I didn't get, or were subtle or whatever. And he was able to give those messages because they're embedded in a story that's compelling, because that seems to be what he cares about first and foremost, is telling a story.
Which I've noticed, if a person has a good grasp of cause and effect relationships, they typically can be a pretty good storyteller. You tend to get, certain people that they you could draw them a line, conspiracy theory style, where you put a little tack here and a note, and then attach red string between another tack and say, okay, because you did this, Y is going to happen, and they still wouldn't get it. And, as long as you get this sort of logical narrative flow, hey, you know what? You're following the basic rules of storytelling, right? You establish your characters, you establish your setting. Once you've established your characters and your setting, then you explain what the hell's happened. What they have to now do. Do they have to journey to the West? Do they have to go on an odyssey? Do they have to whatever? But first step is always the setting, and then the characters. Sometimes it's character then setting, but that's actually pretty rare. Most of the time it's setting first, even if it's something as simple as once upon a time or a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You establish that whatever the setting is. You can see it on sitcoms. You can see it anywhere. Whenever they start, a scene, they'll start with exterior wide of the building, and usually somebody's talking, and then they cut to inside into the room where that character is still talking. Watch Seinfeld, watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, watch anything where it's like, okay, you exterior shot, that's setting. Interior shot starts things rolling. So yeah, Denis Villeneuve, he did all the heavy lifting in Dune 1. And that allowed him to play in this one, because he was able to now go into things like, okay, the water of life, the life cycle of the worms. He didn't really touch too much on the life cycle of the worms and how the worms actually are what create the spice and all that sort of stuff. Now that I'm thinking about it, there was one scene where I fundamentally disagreed. And that was at the very end, when Paul threatens to nuke the spice fields. I'm sitting here going, that should terrify every single Fremen within earshot. And then the fleet in orbit still did not acquiesce to Paul's demand, and Paul didn't follow through. So he instantly started himself off but that happens at the end of the movie, and you're sitting there going back to your point is, how is this going to mess with part 3? What
Mhm.
this is a lot of things that Andre from Midnight's Edge was pointing out was the fact that that this really throws off a lot of the potential storytelling when you've already established Paul is this monster who can't be stopped, and he's launching a jihad, and he makes this threat and they don't obey, and he doesn't follow through on his threat. It's like, no, you should never have had him threaten to blow up the spice fields if you weren't willing to, or you should have addressed that in the movie that
Mhm.
Josh Brolin's character should have elbowed him in the ribs, and you say, you don't ever make a threat that you're not willing to follow through on.
Mhm.
Now they think you're weak, and your job is going to be twice as difficult because they're going to be, trying to exploit what they perceive as your weakness.
Yeah.
Something like that should have taken place, and it's like I'd consider that to be kind of a big deal, considering the rest of the movie was really good. As I
Mhm.
said, the first half of this movie I had no problem with. I loved.
Yeah.
And then you start getting into the war, and you're just like, okay, how fast is he doing all this? Hold on a second. Jessica's still preggers. She's taken the water of life, and just to clue Sam in, the water of life basically gives the combined knowledge of all of the Reverend Mothers of all time, gives all of that knowledge to the woman who drinks from the waters of life.
It's the super duper pure LSD.
So by Jessica, me and Heath have been talking about, the baby who's killing people. By Jessica drinking that while she's pregnant, she also passed all of that down to her unborn child,
Mhm.
which it gives the unborn child all of the knowledge of centuries, maybe even millennia of knowledge before it's, while it's still in the womb. It can't do
Mhm.
anything, which is why it's able to have these telepathic conversations with Paul and his mother, because it's like, okay, you've basically got a supernatural being now inside of you, which is why when in the books, why she's able to do these amazing things at the age of 2. And the thing is, you could easily have switched that where Jessica has the baby, but because the baby is still it doesn't do advanced development. It doesn't make you grow or your muscles or your bones solidify. It's still got the little soft spot on its head, right? It doesn't do that any faster. You could still have the baby in the crib telepathically communicating, accomplishing a lot
Yeah.
of the same thing. That way you could still do this passage of time, which would explain a lot of the Fremen's change of how they wage war,
Yeah.
thanks to Paul. And, that might have fixed some issues that they're going to have to cross these T's and dot these I's in part 3 if they do it. If they don't do part 3, then yeah, this turns out to be perfectly serviceable. It is a beautiful movie.
That was a point I did want to make. Is now supposedly part 3 is listed as in production. Who knows how much work they've actually done on it? I do recall seeing a headline a week or two ago, and I didn't have time to read the article, of Villeneuve saying that part 3 was going to be delayed for some reason. So who the heck knows why? But I felt it had an ending. It wasn't like the first one where it's over now. Now it was an ending that was left open, and my first thought was it's kind of like a New Hope, where well, the Empire's not defeated; they just blew up the Death Star. Darth Vader's still alive, but it was less triumphant than that. And then I thought, actually, I think a better analogy would be like the end of the first Matrix, where you didn't need a sequel. That was a perfectly acceptable ending, and the good guy won, and you know the fight goes on, and then he flies off, literally just flies off into the sky, and then roll the credits. So, hey, cool. If you continue the story, great, or not great as it turned out to be, but we'll set that aside. But if not, we have an ending, and you can just in your own head canon, the fight goes on. So
Well,
if they don't, it will be slightly disappointing, but only because this movie was so good, you would hope that they would continue on and continue to build.
and all these again nitpicks, because when you stop and think about how, oh my god, this could be so horrible, I can also see them relatively easily fixing it just by starting part 3 5 years later. And now all of a sudden it's like, okay, there's your time jump. They've had to learn while they were in space or whatever. The toddler is now a 5-year-old who can actually say her own lines. She doesn't have to understand what she's saying. Just here, say these lines. These are complicated words for a little girl. I understand, but just say them and do a combination of the little actress performance plus Anna Taylor-Joy's narration, because she played Paul's sister. So the combination of that'll solve it. Time jump in between 2 and 3, that'll solve it. And just start off, say, hey, 91 billion people are dead. X number of planets have had exterminatus declared on them and have had all life on the planet wiped off. And the jihad continues. And then it's like, okay, well, that might actually solve a lot of these issues. And then you just have Shawnee there with Paul, bouncing Paul's son on her knee. And it's understood. Okay, well, yeah, Shawnee blew off some steam. She came back to Paul. It's all been ironed out. And so I know that, I don't want to accuse Andre on Midnight's Edge of being too clickbaity or going whole full Chicken Little on this. But the simple fact of the matter is, yeah, no, the sky is falling. Shawnee's, the focus was put to Shawnee at the end. And it's just like, it could be fixed. It's just like the issues I had at the end of Dune Part 1. I think Villeneuve, he actually did a really good job addressing the issues that popped up in Dune Part 1 and kind of going, okay, yeah, we can trim a little bit of fat here, trim a little bit of fat there. We're just off to the races and doing kick-ass shit now. So sorry.
I got a nitpick, and this
Yeah,
is
what's
me. This is me working in ecologies and physiology. Did they ever address in the books or the movies what these damn worms eat?
Okay, I guess is left open. I believe that
Because
they are well, I believe that they're filter feeders,
in the sand,
kind of like, yeah, in the sand. So they're kind of like, like a sponge in the ocean is just basically trying to gather any sort of plant, anything that goes into its fate. So it just kind of, these worms are literally like a jet engine in the sand, because they don't slither through the sand. They open their mouth, everything pours in the front, and everything pours out the back as they move through the sand. That's one of the ways that the Fremen are able to ride the worms, is because the worm's not slithering like a snake. It's not rippling its carapace. It doesn't even have the little prongs from those worms in Tremors, right? That it's literally just a jet engine going through the sand, swallowing the sand and anything else. Those little Maudib mice, the little desert mice, something like that. It's like, it's like, okay, all the ecology on Arrakis is at the mercy of these worms.
this is my problem with some of these. A movie I'll think of is like the Meg movies. They make it so big. I'm like, it wouldn't even care about a human. 50 of them swimming in a circle, maybe you'd come take a chomp, but that would be like me telling you do 3 backflips and 100 push-ups and you can have a chicken nugget. that's not a very efficient use of your energy for food. And I was like, do these worms like eat the people? Are they scared of them? They're just so
Well,
massive.
it's one of the things is that it's like it gets up to a certain speed and it can just keep trucking along. It's like at a certain point, its momentum is carrying it a lot. Um, and I think that's one of the reasons why they respond to vibrations the way they do, is because, ooh, anything giving enough of vibration on the sand is going to draw any sandworm in the area, because the sandworm instinctively is just going to go, sustenance. Okay, it's not going to alter course for a Maudib mouse, the big desert mouse, the big eared desert mouse that they showed in the first one and the second one. But something human size, we don't know what their anatomy, what their caloric needs are. Yeah, if we're looking at this as purely, purely modern day biology, blah 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 blah. Oh, you're losing your camera there, Sam.
I got it.
Okay. But yeah, in the strictest realist sense of the, what we understand, yeah, technically it doesn't make sense because they would be expending more calories than what they were taking in.
Well, if she got all of the knowledge from all of the past lives, her hippocampus would be big enough to feed one.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is what you
This is when you know physics and you know physiology. You hate action movies and
right.
yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is that you have an anatomical mindset, that
No, I
that's
just like
weird.
picking at stuff like that. It's just
Yeah, and it's perfectly reasonable. That's usually how I debunk in just my personal life when people ask me about Loch Ness or, Bigfoot or anything like that. I'd just be like, "What are they eating?"
hmm yeah.
In real life, it's perfectly capable, perfectly
Mhm.
serviceable. But in a book like Dune, where you're like, "Oh, hey, there are these worms that they crap hallucinogens, and the hallucinogens are just more important than oil and technology." And
They turn
oh
people into
yeah,
supercomputers so that they can travel faster than light.
it's basically like you take these hallucinogens and suddenly you're a Jedi, right? It's like, oh, okay, I don't want to say that Star Wars borrowed anything from Dune, but there are definite comparisons and overlap there, where it's just like, yeah, if you can tap into that sort of thing that doesn't really have a logical explanation, there is a lot of that, metaphysical, spiritual sort of stuff going on. So
Well,
you're either on board with giant worms or you're not. If you're one of the people that's not on board with giant worms, then yeah, I don't think Dune will ever be the series for you, especially
well,
if you don't want to see
yeah.
like a person morphing into a giant worm and all that sort of
Well,
crazy stuff.
that's one of the interesting things about the story that for years has to me been interesting and amusing, which is the number of people who see religious allegory in it, and then the people who think this is, you know, heretical blasphemy because of the the things he borrowed so heavily from, which was obvious. The most obvious one are the Islamic traditions, because he was so fascinated by desert culture and desert ecology, which is where the genesis of the story actually came from, was the ecology, and then the other stuff came later, as I understand it. And so he very obviously borrowed heavily from Islamic tradition and Arabic language. But then there are the Messiah tropes, and then there's some stuff that, if you're so inclined, you're going to see some Christian imagery there, and then blah blah blah. But to me, that's again the element of a good story, is the bones of it are so compelling that different people can have different things, different thoughts triggered in their minds of, oh, hey, if that, then this, then that, then this, and go down these rabbit holes.
Well, it goes back. I always say people will find what they're looking for.
Mm.
And that's just my way of saying when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. It's like, okay, if you're looking to find examples of theological messaging, you'll find it. If you're looking for examples of racism, you'll find it. If you're looking for things about, white colonization and crap like that, you'll find it. And I don't mean just in this movie, I'm just talking about in life. You will always find what you are trying to find evidence of. That's heck, even when doing goal setting, they always tell you set yourself an affirmative goal. Don't say, I need to stop eating cupcakes, because your brain doesn't really operate that way. You always say, I need to eat 2 servings of vegetables every day, or whatever. It's a more positive line of thinking, because your mind knows how to focus in and target a specific thing that it wants to find, whereas it doesn't really know how to block out. Like, it starts looking for whatever it is you want it to block out. So that's a problem with depression that a lot of people suffer from. That's a problem because all of a sudden they start only being able to see evidence of their depression and the effects of their depression. And it's like
Rumination.
yeah, it spirals. So, I sit back and I say, okay, well, is there elements of these theological messages? Of course there are. Herbert even specifically stated that the Fremen canonically are, and I forget whether they're either the Shia or the Sunni. Canonically, that's where their origins are from, 10,000 years in the future. That's kind of what ends up happening to that people. And it's like, okay, obviously there's going to be, elements of religion when it's all tied in like that. And, but it goes back to what I said initially about Herbert approached his world building from this kind of mixed media approach, where he was looking at religion, he was looking at politics, he was looking at sociology, he was looking at philosophy, he was looking at history, blah 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 blah.
Pharmacology.
Yeah. Compare that to like Tolkien, who just said, I invented a language and now I'm going to write a story about this language. And it's like, okay, cool. Thank you, professor. So they approach world building from 2 entirely different ways.
Yeah.
That Tolkien was very much fascinated with the linguistic and historical aspect of things, whereas Herbert was very much focused on looking at modern day socio-political trends. And if you drag them out to the nth degree, where the horrifying potential would lead. And that it's actually very feasible. Yes, feudalism can actually occur again. Because, hey, we're not careful, doomed to repeat it, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to try to lecture anyone here or any of the viewers at home.
That might be a good place to bring it home. That's
okay. Did you have anything to say about Dune Part 2, Sam? I know, having never seen it.
I would say
are you going to see it?
I will see it, and I had no plans to till Heath brought this up, because again, just the way that I like build up and in that silent character building, but it didn't go anywhere in the first one.
Right.
So I needed something to draw me to the second one at the end to want to see the second one.
I think that also there are a few movies out there that are designed to be seen on the big screen. I think this is one of them. That going into
not laying in your bed with a 12-pack of tacos and
yeah, Not like this. You don't want to try
No,
to
I got
do it like this.
I got a 55-inch screen in there.
Okay, good.
It's not little.
But yeah, if you're doing the full sea otter thing where you just got your tacos and burritos laid out and you're smacking them with a rock and stuff like that, no, it's probably not the best way of watching this. There are very few movies that come out like that too, where you just say, "Oh, you need to kind of see it in theaters." And most, I hate to say, most of the um, those sort of movies that are, well, effects laden and just really really jaw dropping and cinematic and really into the image, a lot of times they fall flat on the actual story itself.
Yes.
And there, I think Dune 2 actually fulfills the story and the cinematic side of things. So I would recommend, if you're going to go see it in theaters.
Absolutely. All right. Well, if no one else has anything, then I guess we will see y'all next time, which for me and Sam will be Friday for whatever we're rambling about, like, you know, getting through the Gathering Storm and Wheel of Time.
All right.
My sympathies.
See y'all later.